This is the Motherlands Podcast. The intention of this podcast is to provide evidence-based information through honest conversations on fertility, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and beyond by bridging together the two worlds of allopathic medicine and holistic practices to improve the reproductive health outcomes of women. I am your host, Keely Semler. Hi, welcome back to the Motherlands Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I am sitting right now on a floor cushion in my home. The birds are chirping. The sun is shining. We've got quite a few hummingbirds here, which is so fun to see. I wanted to make this space cozy this week because I don't have a guest to share. I am just going to be rambling on about my experience and my path in becoming a doula, as well as sharing how the choices pregnant people make really impact birth outcomes. I'm going to talk about the difference between working with a Western doctor versus a community-based midwife, the pros and cons of each. I'm also going to talk about considerations when hiring a doula. There's a lot out there, and I think this is just going to be a place for me to share my thoughts, my preconceived musings, if you will. So I hope you enjoy this one. Feel free to share with anyone you know that is pregnant or may become pregnant down the line. I think this will be very helpful. And if you're listening and you happen to hear my neighbor's lawnmower, I apologize. It is what it is. Let's start with my path to becoming a doula because I get this question a lot. I think anyone I ever interview with to support them wants to know, how did I become a doula? And the truth is, it wasn't something I was looking for. It wasn't even something I understood. In fact, when I first heard about doula work, I thought that was a glorified yoga teacher. No offense to yoga teachers whatsoever. I so appreciate what yoga has to offer. It just wasn't something that I was interested in doing. And it also really highlights my ignorance, which I am happy to admit to. But I was in graduate school. I was studying child and maternal health at a medical school. And I was particularly interested in researching how stress and trauma gets stored in the body and how that impacts health outcomes for women and children. And I had a couple people in my program ask me, well, what about childbirth? And at the same time, I had a family member ask me, hey, would you ever consider being a doula? At the time, I remember kind of brushing it off, being like, no, I don't want to be a doula. I want to work in medicine. I knew I wanted to help people and I knew I wanted to help women. I just had no idea what it would look like. And so as I was completing my graduate program, this woman reached out to me who heard about what I was researching. And she said, I'm 46 years old and I'm going through a divorce and I'm pregnant with my 6th baby. And I was like, wow. Amazing. Congratulations. And also, I'm so sorry. And she was like, I just need someone to be a supportive presence to me when I give birth. I thought, okay, I'm willing to do that. I'm happy to do that. I don't have any experience. She was okay with that. I had shared with her that my upbringing, I spent a lot of time in hospitals in effort to keep my personal life a little bit private. I will say I grew up in hospitals. My brother was special needs. He had a very rare genetic disease. And I just was so used to seeing my brother in the ER and watching my parents advocate for him and ask questions to nurses and doctors. There were a lot of issues. For example, I noticed a lot of the nurses weren't paying attention to my brother's chart and would give him medications that he was allergic to. So growing up, I knew that hospitals were important and life-saving, but my experience was that no matter who was in the hospital, they needed someone to be there to make sure that things were going smoothly and that people were doing their job efficiently. Being a doula now, I see that my childhood was preparing me, and it's a skill that is difficult to learn in the context that I learned it. I supported this woman, the 46-year-old, through her birth, and that really kind of opened my eyes up to what someone might need when they're giving birth. And what I observed in that experience is that this woman, this wasn't her first rodeo. So she knew what she needed to feel safe in her body, and she just needed someone to safeguard her. And because of my experience as a child and a young adult, I felt very comfortable being that safety net of support for her and telling the nurses, you know what, can you come back in 10 minutes? She needs some alone time. Or could you not ask her these questions when she's in the middle of having a contraction? She can't focus. It was a really special experience for me, and it changed the trajectory of my life. And that was about 8 years ago. So that's sort of the path that led me to where I am now, where I support clients still in birth. And I'm also teaching new doulas how to be a loving, supportive presence, and also educating clients on all of the choices they get to make throughout pregnancy and birth. For me, sometimes the hardest part of being a doula is helping someone to understand that I cannot shelter anyone from undesirable things from happening. So basically what that means is, if you hire a doula, we know, because the research is clear, that hiring and working with a doula is protective in maternal health outcomes. There are better outcomes when there is a doula present. But hiring a doula doesn't absolve you from any decision making during the journey of labor and birth. And this is an obvious one, but it is worth saying a doula is not birthing the baby for you. And I say this with respect and kindness. When you work with a doula, they're holding up a mirror for you, and they're helping you to recognize that all of the choices that you're making are contributing to how you feel safe in your body. So what I do is I educate my clients, and I help my clients learn the language of advocating for themselves. So there are some doulas that say that they are the advocate on behalf of women. And I think that that's lovely, but I am teaching my clients how to advocate for themselves and to help the partner, if they have one, create a space and privacy on behalf of the laboring woman so that she can feel safe and calm and confident. And why does this matter? Because when someone feels scared or anxious or nervous, it makes it really hard for a baby to be born, because you're basically telling your baby, don't come, it's not safe. I say this again with kindness, but I do not and cannot rescue anyone. But I can absolutely help you become aware of how powerful the choices you make throughout your pregnancy and labor, and how these choices impact how you feel in your body. I have no expectations or opinions on how someone chooses to give birth. Truly, I do not. Frankly, I think there are too many doulas that are judgmental of how someone chooses to give birth. A lot of people sort of preach natural is better. I think that can be true for some people and not true for others. There's just some people that are not going to feel safe giving birth at home. And instead of making that person feel bad about them not feeling like that's the right choice for them, I'm going to make them feel empowered about choosing to give birth in the environment that makes sense for them. And that might be a hospital. I will also help clients address the choices they make, especially if it is coming from a place of fear or from people pleasing, as so many women often make choices from these places, and it really can leave someone from feeling disempowered by the end of it. Sometimes when I'm listening to a client process about where they're planning to give birth or something that came up with their provider, whether it be a doctor or a midwife, and they're just sort of trying to make sense of it, if I feel like they're making a choice based from a place of fear or people pleasing, I'm going to say that. I'm going to let them know, like, this is your choice. because yes, you are a patient or you are a client, but I think it's important to know as well that you are a customer. And so having a provider that treats you with respect and like you are an intelligent human being, and this is a collaborative experience, is super important for me and for my clients. Here are just some of my own thoughts on giving birth in 2024 in the US. And once again, if you're my client listening to this, just know I respect your opinions and your decisions that you get to make. These are just my thoughts and observations after attending over 200 births now. I think it's important to know the difference between working with a doctor when you're pregnant versus working with a midwife. And again, there's no universal right or wrong here. As you sort of step into your power in becoming a mother or preparing for motherhood, I think it's important to surround yourself with people that make you feel good about the choices that you're making and not make you feel like you're doing something wrong or bad or, you should do it a certain way. Doctors, and I'll try not to make too many generalizations here, as this is one of the main problems in birth work, in my opinion. But doctors are trained in medicine. They're trained in the medical system. They're trained to intervene as early on as they need to, using interventions like induction and sometimes cesarean, because that's what feels comfortable to them, because that's how they're trained. Pregnancy is usually seen as something that needs to be cured or modified or augmented because they don't learn to trust the physiological process of labor and birth. It's not seen as a natural, healthy event. It's seen as something that needs to be intervened or fixed. There are people that working with a doctor is just appropriate for their body. For example, someone that is high risk. Well, what is high risk? It really depends who you ask. Most doctors are very sensitive to risk, and they're going to try to eliminate any and all risk associated with pregnancy, labor, and birth. But see, here's the reality. Being pregnant and giving birth is an inherently risky thing. There are no guarantees, ever. When you work with a doctor that is super sensitive to risk, they may intervene prematurely, and when they intervene prematurely, they may create more problems that didn't exist to begin with. I have no idea if that makes any sense. If it doesn't, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to explain it more in detail. I am not anti-doctor. I'm not anti-hospital. I want to make that very clear because there are real reasons why someone needs to be induced or why someone needs to have a cesarean. And all of my clients learn what those reasons are so that if they need to pivot for a real reason, that they're not scared and that they don't feel bad or they don't feel like they've failed. So I want to talk about community-based midwifery care because some of you know, I know clients that are listening know that I was studying to become a midwife. I have clinical training. I've worked in hospitals. I've worked at home births. I've attended birth center births. I've seen all the different settings and environments of giving birth. And I think that the reason why I have chosen to kind of put on pause becoming a midwife is because I think the bulk of pregnancy and birth comes from within and feeling confident within your body and feeling safe and calm in your body. And it almost doesn't matter who you choose as your provider, because if you don't feel safe, calm, and confident within your body, then it doesn't matter where you give birth. But community-based midwifery care, in theory, it's an incredible solution in improving maternal health outcomes, because when you hire a midwife that's practicing community-based midwifery care, they really follow you. They spend a lot of time with you. They put your hands on your body and help you understand what is it that your body's going through? How is your baby developing? It's an interpersonal relationship that is very different than the 5-10 minutes you get in a traditional OBGYN's office. Midwifery care is an incredible effort in improving maternal health outcomes. The problem is it is expensive, and many midwives don't take insurance. Where I live in Southern California, a new family is looking to pay anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 for midwifery care. Wow, that is expensive. And although doctors do accept insurance, many of the good doctors that I have worked with that approach childbirth more hands-off, more trusting of physiological birth, they don't take insurance. And the good doctors that do take insurance, they usually charge an additional concierge fee. So what's a concierge fee? It's an additional fee that is pushed onto the patient that basically gives that patient access to that doctor, whether it be through an on-call service or some type of guaranteed delivery. If they're a part of a practice, you pay this extra fee, and then that doctor will ensure that they attend your birth. Again, a new family can expect to pay anywhere from $3,000 to $12,000 out of pocket, even with insurance, for a good doctor. It's really frustrating when I think about the cost of starting a family. I think it places an incredible burden on a new mother. And the fact that our country doesn't have any paid leave, I know that these new moms won't get any federal financial support to heal and recover from birth. So of course she's going to be eager to get back to work and provide for her family, because there's really no safety net of support unless she has a lot of private money to support her. Another very important distinction between doctors and midwives is that doctors are surgeons and midwives are not. Doctors are able to perform cesarean births. Midwives are not. So if you're working with a midwife, I think it's important to ask them, what is your transfer rate? Meaning, of all of your clients, how many of them have to be transferred from home or a birth center to the hospital? And that can give you something to think about. Doctors, on the other hand, I think it's important to ask them, what is their cesarean rate? Of all the patients they care for, how many of them end up in a cesarean? Now, when we look at cesarean births, it's important to know that yes, there are real medical reasons, as I mentioned before, to have a cesarean birth. But what some people don't realize is that cesarean births are expensive. And so doctors and hospitals make more money performing a cesarean birth than they do with a live, natural, physiological vaginal birth. Well, why is that? Well, because they're using an OR, because they have to staff the OR. They're using anesthesia. They're using lots of medical equipment and technology. The hospital stay is longer for a cesarean birth than it is for a vaginal birth. Sometimes I really wonder, are cesarean births so high in our country, partly due to the fact that it's more convenient on doctors to just do a cesarean, first of all, because they're comfortable doing them. Second of all, they're generating more money. This hurts my heart a little bit, but I think about it all the time. Because midwives do not perform cesareans, they are not experts in high-risk pregnancy. Doctors are, because doctors are the ones that can do induction and cesarean. Doctors are extremely skilled surgeons and extremely skilled in high-risk pregnancy and birth. Therefore, doctors are not the most knowledgeable in normal, healthy, physiological, uncomplicated birth. Midwives are. And in order for us to talk about risk, what makes someone high risk, we also need to talk about liability, because doctors have malpractice insurance. Unfortunately, they get sued a lot. It's expensive. It's really challenging because nobody wants poor outcomes for a mother or a new baby. And I think that how they assess risk inherently is conservative for this reason, because they're trying to protect their business. Midwives assess risk a little bit differently because they're not working within the same medical framework that doctors are. Their liability, how they practice, is different than doctors. For example, a lot of midwives, they don't have liability insurance. Some of them do, especially if they're a nurse midwife, but a lot of them open an LLC, and that gives them more protection than getting some sort of medical out-of-hospital liability coverage. Hopefully you catch my drift that liability is factored in a provider's choice in flagging a patient or a client high risk. I just want to reiterate that there's no universal truth in how someone should give birth. Doctors aren't better or worse than midwives. Midwives are not better or worse than doctors. It really just depends on the individual. That's really my offering to my clients, is helping guide them through their choices, coming from a place of safety, calm, and confidence, not from a place of fear or people pleasing. I really think that it's been an honor to support so many different women through their birth experience. And partners are really special because so often the mom comes to me, I'm pregnant, I need a doula, but my husband doesn't know if we need one, or he's not quite sure what you do. It's one of my favorite components of being a birth worker is getting them involved as much or as little as they would like to be or as the mother would like them to be, and helping them recognize what their value is in the birth space. Because a lot of partners, and I'm particularly talking about heterosexual couples, but this is not universally true for everybody, but a lot of men want to fix something. They want to make something better. They want to do something about it. But labor really requires the partner to be just a loving presence who is witnessing the hard work being done. I just love teaching them about that because they're less likely to be shell-shocked from the experience or look at me and say, there was nothing I could do. And I know she was just so challenged by labor. Instead, they say, I totally get it now. And I see how I am not by design supposed to intervene unless she really needs me, and that my presence is really what empowers her and also what makes her feel safe. And I've also supported clients that don't have a partner, and even more reason to hire a doula so that you can build the safety net of support. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. I'm really curious if this was interesting to you or if there's anything I can talk more deeply about. Feel free to send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. hello@keelysemler.com. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share with friends and family and stay tuned for the next episode.